Brothers and sisters, all things begin with the remembrance of the infinite, comprehensive mercy and grace of Allah Azza wa Jal. Our existence is a manifestation of divine mercy. Every moment of our life is filled with so many countless favors and blessings. So we praise Him in abundant praise. We seek to live a life of gratitude which can only be established through learning the revelation, through studying the divine speech and the guidance that it offers us, through studying and trying to live according to the example of our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And it is in this life that we will receive and attain ultimate mercy, and that we may communicate that to the world before we leave this earth. It's important to understand what exactly the implications of being a believer in the finality of prophethood, carrying this standard of the final revelation sent to humanity. The Quran is a book of guidance. It is sent to mankind to remind us who we are, what we're doing here, and where we are going and why. The Quran tells us, وَلَقَدْ صَرَّفْنَا فِي هَذَا الْقُرْآنِ لِيَذَّكَّرُوا. He says in the royal we, talking in great importance, we have explained many things in this Quran so that people would reflect and be reminded upon the purpose of their existence. The contents of the Quran are many divine signs in various forms, guiding us on the straight path. Out of that guidance, from a quarter to a third, the scholars have told us, of the Quran's content is in using stories of past nations, of people from which we learn lessons from the past generations. He says, سُنَّةَ اللَّهِ فِي الَّذِينَ خَلَوْا مِن قَبْلِ وَلَن تَجِدَ لِسُنَّةِ اللَّهِ تَبْدِيلًا. He explains to us comprehensively that it is His way in creation that you see things happening, that there is a divine order to things, that as we are participants in cause and effect, we are participants in divine decree, that the decisions we make can change the way things are or will be. You see that certain nations took some decisions and that raised those nations high. Other nations took wrong decisions and that brought them low. And so these are the systems, sunnat Allahi fil ladina khalaw. That this is His systems that these people are tapping into. It's crucial for us as believers to see the big picture. You know, the idea of religion being my personal religion, of my prayers and my fasting and things, that is intentionally put there so that the social construct of Islam as a reality intended to affect the entirety of society as a moral value system, that idea of personal religion is secularism. It's trying to limit your capacity to be a nation. And the nation is not a state with a flag. The nation is a collective of people all over the earth that are joined by their faith and their values. So the way of nations is something that has been decreed. It is something that we have to realize. Now, a lot of people say, okay, what are we going to do in the world? We have no power. We're just a small, insignificant group here in America, for example. Well, Allah said, كَمْ مِنْ فِئَةٍ قَلِيلَةٍ غَلَبَتْ فِئَةً كَثِيرَةً بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ وَاللَّهُ مَعَ الصَّابِرِينَ. He says, there have been, he uses a question to emphasize a point. There have been many cases in His decree in human history where a small, seemingly insignificant group without power overcame and defeated a much larger group by His will, because they were steadfast, they were perseverant, that they saw the purpose that they were living for. And so 2 days ago, many Americans were celebrating Juneteenth. Understanding this holiday is carrying crucial relevance to us as American Muslims, especially as we are witnessing our government support a genocide in such an atrocious manner. Abraham Lincoln, he issued the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863. That said, all of the slaves are free. January 1st, 1863. Technically, the 250,000 slaves that were living in the state of Texas were free back then. But they didn't know, because the power structures around them and the propaganda machines were not in any rush to inform them that the federal government has authoritatively given you your freedom. It wasn't until 2.5 years later, these people are still living in abuse and humiliation and torture as slaves, that on June 19th, 1865, 2.5 years later, the federal troops came into Texas to seize control and to force all of those people who are keeping slaves to let them free. And that became Juneteenth, meaning the day when actually the end of slavery existed. So it took 2.5 years. So now the point that we want to extrapolate from this first point here is that our government, the United States government, has a history of making and celebrating declarations of rights, freedoms, and values, which it then overtly neglects, sometimes sabotages, and even sometimes opposes those declarations of rights and freedoms and values, of laws and rights of people and international laws and the things that we're seeing right now. This is not anything new. The sunnatullah, it's happening again because we're not learning lessons. And had we have been preparing ourselves as believers 25, 30 years ago, thinking about the big picture of where we fit into this construct of this land that we lived, how do we relate, how do we establish a stronger positioning, then things may be different, wallahu a'lam. But here we are living in reality, and now the future is ours to decide how we will deal with things. So now if we look shortly after June 19th, 1865, okay, Juneteenth, and now officially slavery is not anywhere happening in the United States, the southern states began passing laws, what are known as the Jim Crow laws, immediately after that, which became an apartheid system in this country, in which black people were segregated from white people. And so what happened was, from about 1870 something all the way up for 100 years until the end of the 1960s, okay, that there was two realities all over the country in many places. One for white people, which was very comfortable and good resources and opportunity, like for example in Israel for Jews, okay, and the other for black people, which was quite the opposite, a very difficult lower standard of life where you were seen as a humiliated, lesser than, unworthy, suspect problem for society, right, which is exactly what Palestinians have been going through since 1948 in their own country, institutionally. And so that correlation is not anything other than exact methods. And these are the sunnah of Allah that people have taken decisions. And the question is, how do you respond to these decisions? So in this country where we live, there is a certain sunnah, and in other places there are different sunnahs, and so those scholars will address that there. It is not my business to tell people what to do in Palestine, and not to blame or criticize anybody's reaction to these things over there. But for here, we have a specific situation. So most Americans are actually not aware of Juneteenth and what happened and what exactly was Jim Crow laws. Most people under 40 could not really tell you anything about that, right? There is even more important development in this story that we need to tap into and understand, because now we see all of these laws being drafted, and they're saying, okay, now you can't criticize Israel, and this is against the law, and you'll lose this, and this will happen, and so forth and so on. And so what happened is that there was a sense of resilience in the black community that a lot of people are not aware of. Okay? How many of you know about the Brooklyn Village history of Charlotte, North Carolina? Wow. So there was a thriving black community in Brooklyn Village all the way up until the mid-1970s. And they were thriving. They had very good, comfortable life. There were people doing very well, wealthy, but it wasn't all black. It was after, kind of Jim Crow now. But then the Charlotte City Council and people, they decided they wanted to basically develop those areas. And so they displaced them, destroyed all of their stuff, took it over, and now you see since then, it's pretty much all white people living there, and it's all a different area. We have the Spectrum Arena and all those things there, right? And so this was a thriving black community where they have generations been living for a long time, and they were able to thrive even with segregation, right? So there's the Haiti district in Durham, North Carolina. It was an amazing bedrock of communal flourishing during Jim Crow. While the government was institutionally oppressing them, they said, okay, fine, cut us off from all of the white privileges and all of that. We will develop our own means. We will work together and support each other as a community, not try to sham each other and get special deals just because we're black people with black. No, we want to help each other grow and lift each other up and bring each other up in the world, which other people have done in their history, and you see where they're at. So are we doing that as Muslims? Do we support each other and the strongest? Are we dedicated to those who share our values and beliefs first? And so I'm from Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I can remember taking Oklahoma history class in 8th grade. And I can remember vividly that there was nothing about Greenwood or the Black Wall Street. Not anything. Why? Because I learned about that in the year 2013 when I heard of a big news story that now they were trying to develop the land of Black Wall Street, which became Greenwood or the north side, and they found a grave, a mass grave of 140 some odd people, that there was no record of a grave there or any record of these people. And they found others, and they found them in other states, and they found them all over Canada, where indigenous and black people were massacred like we see in Gaza. And they were put in graves, but nobody reported that. Because guess what I grew up knowing? I grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, knowing that the north side is the filthy black part of town. It's 95% plus black, and they have drugs and gangs and fighting and prostitution and problems, and it's all a terrible place. And of course, the racist elements around me somehow had me thinking it must have something to do with them being black. When in fact, what actually happened in the well-documented history that I was not told, okay, is that when there was a dispute about a lady who left an elevator in downtown, which is a couple miles away from Greenwood, that she claimed that he was making advances towards her. And then they arrested him. But he's actually a very good Christian young man who would never do such a thing, and there's no witness or evidence, and he's obviously saying he didn't do it. So there was some disputes as the court case was going on, and some fighting. And so I heard about riots, but the way I heard it was some unruly black people are just trying to destroy the good, white downtown area. Well, in fact, what happened was a bunch of crazy white KKK people not only shot and murdered hundreds of black people without the police supporting them. They actually got little small planes that they had, and they basically put tar bombs and destroyed. And so at that time, what there was the Black Wall Street with Route 66 there, and that the economy of Black Wall Street was better than any white economy in the state of Oklahoma and in many other states. And you would see people walking down the street with top hats and suits, and they have all of their industry, they have all of everything. This is Black Wall Street, why they called it, because it was one of the most uppity places in the country, and it was a segregated Jim Crow area in Tulsa, Oklahoma. But what they did was they destroyed it and wiped it out. They say, see, look at them. When people say, okay, look at Palestine, look at Gaza, why are they like the way they are? People would racially believe that it's because they're Palestinian. Like there's something wrong with these people, the racist narrative, the Islamophobic narrative. But it's what Israel has been doing to them with the cover of their daddy here in America for 75 years. It's the same stuff. And people are growing up believing about it, certain things, because they don't know the history. Now you see why history is very important. Because when you know history, number one, you actually know what you're dealing with it and why it is the way it is. But number two, you start to learn how do you resist that. And that's what we'll talk about in the second khutbah. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه فإنه هو الغفور الرحيم. So, Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah. After so much of the Jim Crow oppression, the apartheid reality of the United States of America, black people started to get together and say, you know what? Let's start to make a case for ourselves and let's just completely dismiss these laws, knowing that these laws are hypocritical. They go against the Constitution. They go against what we know is morally reasonable and right. They go against the supposed freedom that we have according to the 13th and 14th Amendments. Okay? So they started doing boycotts and sit-ins and basically saying these laws are wrong and we will not accept them. And over years, these people were getting thrown in jails and everybody was calling them a bunch of rebels and they're a bunch of vagrants. As you see how they have pictured people who are protesting on the college campuses. What you're hearing about them was said about these people, and of course Martin Luther King was one of them. If you're thinking during Martin Luther King's life, everyone's like, oh, he's such a great guy, and no, they hated him. All white people hated him. The government hated him. The FBI was following him like he was a terrorist, treating him like he was trying to take down the country. When they lose, then they can change history to make everybody feel comfortable about it. You see? But if you know your history, you will not allow this. And you will be appalled if anybody says something ridiculous and false about history, particularly with the moral implications of oppression. And so they started all of these boycotts and sit-ins and responses. And a lot of people told Martin Luther King, they told Malcolm X and others, you guys are just going to create problems for us. We're black. This is how it is. At least we're not slaves anymore. That's how many talked. Are you that Muslim? Are you that Muslim? Don't cause a problem. Don't stand up against them. Don't say that what might happen? What about your green card? What about all the money you're making? What kind of Muslim are you in this? Because guess what happened? After years of them doing that, the United States government, President, and Congress passed the Civil Rights Bill, which ended Jim Crow. They passed the Brown versus Education. They got their rights to integrate into schools, into restaurants, into housing, and all of that. And they kept fighting because they weren't allowed to vote yet still, because they made all these ridiculous draconian laws and all that. And that's where Selma was. If you're a Muslim living here and your family didn't watch the very good, very gripping movie, which is a very solid depiction of historical fact called Selma, you're missing out. You're not positioning yourself for success in this country if you've not seen that movie. Because it's going to help you understand how they gained their rights and the laws were changed and a lot of improvement to their condition happened. And I can tell you for sure that the only reason Israel gets away with what it gets away with is because enough people in this country believe that they're on the right side. There's enough people here and plenty of the government, a clear majority of the government, but enough of the common people who don't think that there is a problem. But when enough people stand up and they're being abused and humiliated, and when people start, like a lot of people watched the people saying, many of them white people, saying, I'm at an Ivy League college, I've just finished 4 years, they're telling me they're going to take away my college, my future energy. I will lose that to stop these children from being murdered in Gaza. That's what the people are saying. Now, what are you saying as the Muslim who believes yourself to be on the straight path, who believes Jannat al-Firdaus is yours? It doesn't come because you claimed it. It comes because you struggled and strived and worked for it. وَنِعْمَ أَجْرُ الْعَامِلِينَ. Everywhere, a few places in the Quran where he said those who went to heaven, it says, how great is the reward for those who worked for it. The Prophet ﷺ and his companions and any successful movement in our history, and there were many, were people dedicated to their faith and their principles, knowing their history, knowing what they are fighting for is right, and not concerned about what they lost from this world, starting with their own wealth and life. So after protesting all of this hypocrisy and corrupt laws, then what did they do in the early 1980s, late 70s? Many whistleblowers, I've heard them with my ear and watched them with my eye. Whistleblowers from inside of the CIA, people who worked for the CIA, you can look them up. This is so-and-so who worked for the CIA. People who worked for local police departments, and people who were former drug dealers. They've all testified, and lots of evidence have come forth that the United States government, with our taxes, the CIA, is buying cocaine and influxing the black communities with crack cocaine. The CIA. It sounds like a crazy conspiracy theory, but it's a fact rooted in lots of testimony of firsthand witnesses to it. People worked for the government. And you know what their main thing is? It's not just because they don't like the color of their skin. They saw how hard those people were willing to work as a group for rights, and they wanted to stop that way of thinking. They've already got poor white people under control by believing that they're a threat and voting for whatever racist ideas so that the poor white people will not be concerned about their own issue. Because what about the blacks and the Latinos and the Muslims and whoever else? They've been controlling them till today like that. They're foolish to believe these ideas. But the black people were on a move. They were making successes. They were changing laws as not the wealthy, powerful, lobbyists, corporatists, government elitists, but as the people. So they infused their societies with crack cocaine. It was a massive epidemic, ruined the lives and families of hundreds of thousands of people all over the country. So it's important for us. It is our responsibility. It is an obligation in Islam to educate ourselves about our history as Muslims and as people living in America, as people who testify to the concern for the best interests of this country. And then we must organize with like-minded people on morals and values that we agree upon with other Americans. And then we push this agenda of what's best for the whole society. And when people see that you are building social capital, and they see what you're trying to achieve, they will listen to you about what your concerns are. If your only concern is in their mind for a foreign country, then you are just a foreign agent as a parasite here trying to work for some other country. But if you are here, as the Prophet ﷺ was defined, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ, we only sent you, Muhammad, and those who follow you, Muhammad, the believers, as an act of mercy, compassion, benevolence, caring, kindness to everyone on earth. If you are known for institutionally working for the rights and justice and freedoms of other people who are oppressed and mistreated, then they will take a strong listen and advocate for something that may not be so close to home for them. And then will be the end of the apartheid occupation of Israel. That's the only end that's going to come. That's the only way it's going to happen, is that people no longer accept that any person in our government would support those people anymore. That's what happened in South Africa. The whole government, Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher in UK, the great new conservative people of the world, were championing the apartheid regime. And Nelson Mandela was on the FBI terrorist. Remember that. These are historical facts. Don't tell yourself we can't do because it's been done. Don't defeat yourself without entering the battle. Allah says, ثُمَّ إِنَّ رَبَّكَ لِلَّذِينَ هَاجَرُوا مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا فُتِنُوا ثُمَّ جَاهَدُوا وَصَبَرُوا إِنَّ رَبَّكَ مِنْ بَعْدِهَا لَغَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. He says, your Lord watches you. If you migrate away from one land because you feel that land is hard on you, it's difficult, you don't have the means to thrive and survive, I would say that's most people in this room. If you migrated and you then established yourself as one who struggles and strives for the truth, for justice, for rights, for human welfare, and you're patient, willing to withstand the difficulties that come with that, Allah will forgive and have mercy on you. You will go to Jannah, he's telling you. But that is sunnatullah. He's giving you the prescription. You can't leave off the second part. Those who were in a bad situation and they migrated away, and now they go to Jannah. You've missed off the most important half, which is the work that you do where you go. If the believers went from Mecca to Yathrib, and they were just like, okay, now we can just mind our business and everything, but they didn't establish and plan for us to be sitting here today, then we would not be sitting here today. It's that serious. We have been conditioned to think we are not powerful. We have been conditioned to believe that there is no way to overcome this systematic oppression. But throughout history, it has been overcome. And with us, Rasulullah ﷺ and the Quraysh, imagine this guy, the crazy man, confused and, with no support other than these poor, lowly people. To say in 23 years the whole of Arabia is Muslim is equally as bonkers than to say that there is a massive change in the American system and there is freedom and justice that's real, and they end the apartheid state and they pull out all of their military from all over the world and start caring about the people here in this country and stop trying to police the world with corrupt, invasive policies into other people's lives. Because Muslims fought for it. Jihad is a beautiful thing. It has colors, shapes, and sizes. It fits in different situations in different ways. But of course, making you believe the word jihad is bad definitely is intended. Because that is something they're scared of. And it's not because people are going to blow themselves up and kill innocent people. It's because people will change the corruption and the evil as they have done before. That is the responsibility we carry. And that is what Allah called you here today to know and to hear. So we ask Allah to revive in us the prophetic legacy. Ya Allah, we ask you to inspire and motivate us to fulfill our duty on this earth as our time is coming. Ya Allah, make us ready for death when death comes to us. Ya Allah, make us a people of education, those who are educated and educate others. Ya Allah, keep us with clear knowledge and wisdom, and don't allow us to be fooled by conspiracy theories and false stories. Ya Allah, make us among the righteous and the pious that are worthy of your heaven. Ya Allah, make us among those who heard a good word and followed it to the best of our ability. Bring our hearts together. Make us among those who fought for truth and justice. Ya Allah, make us among those who sacrificed like our father Abraham. Ya Allah, make us know who it is that we live for you, the creator, provider, and sustainer of the heavens and the universe, and who it is that we follow, the best of humanity, Muhammad ibn Abdullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Make that our guiding force. Make us the agents of positive change in the world, and remove the oppression and tyranny and corruption from the world by our work ethic and our hard, dedicated faith and action as believers following the message that you have given us. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala alihi sahbihi ajma'in.